conversation today. This is something we decided to do back before the pandemic, was to have Fifth Sunday congregation-wide conversations in person and to just talk about the state of the church, what's happening in the life of the church, and other things that will keep you informed. We kind of put that on pause during some of the pandemic, but we have decided to start again today. Jessica's handing out some more copies of some information, and I just want to tell you, if you're watching at home, we will put a copy of the packet as a PDF for you up on the website and on Facebook. But let's open right now with a time of prayer. Gracious are you, Lord God, and we give thanks for this church. We give thanks for the body of believers here and the ministry that you've given to us. So help us to be faithful to your call, be good stewards of this church, and do what we can to ensure another 100 and some years of ministry. Bless us in this time for open sharing and questions and conversation. Bless us in holy conferencing, and make us ever mindful of the movement and the encouragement of the Holy Spirit. In your name, in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So I'd like to have Mandy Spicer begin. She is the current chair of our leadership team. This means it's her third year on the leadership team, and next year we will have a new leadership team chair. So Mandy, I will give you this microphone. Where I'll find the microphone. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. If you'll take your nice little handout that you have, go to the first page. Trina was nice enough to create us this nice little report that goes over the first 8 months of the year. The top half of it is your revenue. That's the monies that we get in. And she was nice enough to break that down into a couple of categories. You'll notice the first column is general fund, and that's where we're able to pay all of our bills out of. That's the electricity, that is salaries, those types of things. The next categories are special funds. Those are when they are given for specific purposes. And a couple of the purposes that we had this year was for windows, and it was for the sanctuary front door, alarm system, a couple of other specific reasons. And so we were able to accomplish a whole lot of things this year due to those special gifts. The portico, that was another good one too, on the side of the building. Our giving so far this year is pretty parallel with last year, which I think is pretty positive due to COVID and the lesser amounts of interactions that we've had because of COVID. One of the best things that I think that we have is we did engage with an accounting firm to be able to go back and help us recreate some records for transparency purposes, as well as to help Trina and the church staff go into QuickBooks. And so using donations, we created an account there, and so that's how that's paid. And so we have a great relationship with Susan Lively and her firm, and we're able to get timely reports for the leadership team each month to be able to go through there. And copies of those are in the church office. You can contact Trina or Susan for those. Sir? Oh, okay. If you'll also look down on the second part, that is expenses. Another big thing this year is we are 100% caught up on our apportionments for this year, which we have not done in 20 years or so. I'm not sure, but a lot of that's something very, very, very positive that we should be proud of, and thankful to Susan for taking the initiative to get us caught up on those. Danny Steele has worked tirelessly hard trying to help us, and Charlie Staggs with getting certain maintenance costs caught up, and meets with the leadership team and helps us with the windows and helps us with the sanctuary door and the portico. So we're very thankful for that too. But all of it is thankful for your givings that we get. And so if there's any questions that you might have, try to find one of us or Susan or Trina, and we'll be able to explain that. But Yes, ma'am.
How much does it say right there?
200.
Oh, that's how much has been given so far this year. So right, this is just a list of the income this year toward all the funds, not their total. But you're right, there is a columbarium fund. And this, you might be familiar with a columbarium. It is where you may inter ashes. And we have this prayer garden space where we might consider building a columbarium. Now, those are really expensive. We have over, I think, $30,000 in the fund. What we don't have right now is a group that's like looking into making that happen. So there's active giving toward it, but we need some folks to champion that and to make it a reality. Anna Elizabeth. Yep. Thank you. Anna Elizabeth was saying there are some folks who've been on that committee previously. I'd love to restart it and talk about that for the future so we can have that as an offering. We don't want to see funds just sit endlessly and not be used for their intended purpose. And so I'd be grateful for that work to start again. Oh, you're welcome.
And in the monthly financials that they do give us from the accounting firm, they do have the year-to-date as well as the fund-to-date columns. That's okay.
Well,
but in this one, it was just year-to-date. But so
other questions about finances? Thank you. So Don Balch, likewise, last year on the leadership team, going to graduate. And we we talked about having this ministry survey this year. Part of it was to gauge readiness to re-engage ministries, and part of it was to kind of see what you think about the church in our mission field and what kind of church do we want to be. So I asked Don to report on the results.
Okay, so there was 17 questions, and I know I'm probably messing something up. I'm going to set something down. There were 17 questions. We did this survey back in late June, early July time period. So the environment was a little bit different. It looked like doors were going to be open, and we are doing a lot with the church right now, with 2 services and having people in both the sanctuary and here. So that's a good thing. But our survey was a very low population to give us comments, but the comments were good. So I think there was like 16 or 19 personnel that actually responded to the survey. So it was kind of a low population, but the comments were fantastic. And there's some things on the survey that will allow us to kind of start moving forward. Not to say the survey is all ending, because if there's something on here that is missed, and you guys, I see every one of you have a survey and you're looking at it. If you see something in there, you want to comment on it, please feel free to reach out to Mandy, myself, Susan, so that we can continue to grow the church. And that was the intent here, is to identify what we're doing well and areas of opportunities to improve the church. And so that was the whole intent of here. And it covered about services, it covered the youth, it covered the children's program, and other programs, outreach type programs out there. So I'm sure everybody has read the normal ministries. I'm just going to summarize. Everybody's happy to be back around. Unfortunately, COVID's not necessarily cooperating, and everybody in the audience is in mask, and we were probably hoping to be mask free and reaching out. And I saw a lot of comments about enjoying the coffee and the camaraderie, which probably means handshaking, hugging, and close proximity with everybody. But that will come, I'm sure. Worship, and everything is going well there. And you can see on the second page, there's a lot of, the breakdown of who answered what questions, or number, not who, but number of people. I don't want to read everything, but, just to summarize what we're doing well. The first thing that popped up, the blessing box. I heard Susan this morning at the 8:30 talk about the blessing box and, the online services, because that's where we're watching church right now is online services, which probably a lot of people are, and a lot of people were doing their, are watching us now. Serving the community was another thing that we thought we were doing well. Consistency with sermons, and having the church open back up. I drive by here, this weekend, and you saw activity at the church. Either behind the church or by the garden, or up here in the front parking lot. So there are things happening at the church, even when the church is not, in full worship. So that's a good thing. What could we be doing better? One thing I focused on was the seniors. They use the word the seniors, the programs for the seniors. I know we used to have the Thursday program and things like that. So it looks like, there is a request to have us do some things. And when Susan and I talked about this offline, we talked about some, what I refer to as low-hanging fruit, things that we can easily grab hold of and make a difference. And, and that's what we're looking at right now is some of these, I won't say easy, but, we can achieve those and show an impact quickly. And so those are some of the things that we're looking at this time. They're talking about more activities between generations. So that's getting the whole entire church involved in a program. Helping the community, encourage more of our members to participate in activities that are available. That's hard, and that's a personal preference of whether they're going to engage or not engage. And, and I'm not saying that, we need to have more people participate, face to face. I mean, that's something that I'm sure in the future that's something we're going to be looking at is, how do we have a very active church and a very present church and show everybody that, hey, we're a great place to visit and worship with. Some ideas, I'm on the bottom of page 4. Movie night, dinners, Thanksgiving meal. I saw that at several places of hosting something for those who don't have family members or don't have a meal plan. And they also talked about meals. So it's another outreach type program into our community to help people. And I think that's very important. If we're going to continue to be healthy church, we need to have an active outreach program. Excuse me. Several places I saw food trucks. I looked at that as not only food trucks, but we did a rummage sale, we did some other things. That's an outreach to bring people in. We have this lovely room. We have a fantastic pavilion in the back that we probably underutilize. We have the parking lots that we underutilize. How can we actively try to get those into something where we bring people to the church? Not necessarily in the front doors, but get them to the church, get them on the grounds, and then we'll get them in the front doors type activities. How do we want the church known in our community? Caring, helpful, welcoming, enjoyable place to worship. And then they were talking about fifth quarters. I know there was a football game last night, and it was late, but fifth quarters where they have, after the game, they have a place to come in and the youth be able to have an activity, a safe place to actually participate, and other youth type activities. Buildings and grounds. This is where the Thanksgiving came up again, the food trucks. Tailor programs toward what the community needs. That's probably reaching out to the community leadership and saying, hey, where can we better help everybody? There's some suggestions for the leadership team. publishing the minutes. I know that we do publish the minutes, and I know they are available for everybody to read, unless it has a personnel action, and that's kind of held off to the side. But what we talk about in the leadership meetings are available for everybody. They are published, they are approved, and they are available for people to review and read. More diversity among leadership. And then lastly, they talk about during Sunday school time, having the Sunday school classes available and so they can actually have their studies, active studies. Jessica, a lot of positive notes on the children's program. Fabulous job, wonderful person, very much interested in the parents and the children. So, that's saying that, hey, we do have a very strong program with the children. How do we grow in numbers? And I think that's the hard part. It kind of all ties together with, an outreach to the community, bringing people into the parking lot, bringing people into the doors. It all ties together, and how we do that. And that's some low-hanging fruits. And everybody in this room, I know there's interest, and the people that are watching on YouTube, I know there's got to be some interest there, and there's got to be multiple ideas on how we can do this and make things happen. And it's probably easier than sometimes we make it, because sometimes we make things complicated. So we're looking at easy ways to bring people into the church. So children's ministry, recruit more families, and more and more and more and more kids. So that's a great, that's a great reflection on Jessica and what she's doing with that program. The youth program, hey, this is a plan and execute, a calendar of events, that are outreach, so parents can know what's happening and when it's happening, and make things happen so that the youth grow from that experience. It's not only games, but it's also, there's a worship service portion to that. And those were, and then they also talked about the safe sanctuary policies that we have here in place in church. One of the other things they talked about is the praise band. I know we have band members and we have musical gifted people in the youth, and they're looking at, starting that back up. And I know that was very active when I first joined the church here. So there's more things that we can do. And, how do we make that program better? One of the things I underlined in my notes was survey the youth for topics. Get the youth involved on their program and help the youth leader, whether it was Jake or somebody in the future, that would be something that would be helpful, because they have a buy-in on that program. And Susan, do you want me to talk about that second subject too, or while I'm here? Or? Okay. So on the survey, are there any questions, issues? I know you all have it. You're probably just looking at it for the first time. There's more in there than what I actually talked about. I kind of just tried to do a quick summary, but it was, I know it was probably long-winded, as my wife would say. But I was trying to cover all the questions and then kind of give you a quick summary. But, we are looking at it very closely, and there are some good ideas on there, and what can we do to make a difference now? And for the people here and the people that are watching from home, if you have ideas, we would love to hear them. So I'm open for questions. Yes, sir. And I think, Anthony, you're absolutely correct. It takes, the village to grow everybody. And so, whether you're a youth over here like the Owen boys that are here, or it's Paul back there in the corner, some of our more senior members. It's going to take, and everybody in between, if we want programs to happen, we need to look in the mirror and say, hey, we're part of the growth of this church, and we have to step up and be part of that growth of the church and be part of these programs that we wish to have at our church. And Anthony, you're absolutely right. Volunteer, you can't, you heard Mandy talk about the finances, and you got the finances in front of you. We can't just throw money at it and make it happen because, we're limited on the resources that are available to us. But our time is where we're going to make the most impression on our youth and our members and our community. So I really think that, if we're going to make a difference, Anthony, you hit the nail on top of the head. It's us here and us at home that are members of this church that have to become more active. If you want a program to happen, you got to step up and be part of that program and jumpstart it and ensure that it maintains the life of what you're expecting it to occur. Whether it's the youth program, because I know there's several parents out there helping the youth program, but it takes more than just a few, as we all know. Anybody else?
That's it.
Are you going to do the survey again? And if so, how are you going to boost it to get more people to respond to it?
Oh, that's a good question. We didn't have plans at the moment for another survey, but they have. I think this is the third survey I've done in my time here, and they can be a helpful tool. So we're always open to feedback and comments, right? But we can look for another time to do a survey, particularly if there's a decision to make between a couple things or choices, polling the congregation to find out preferences.
What I would say is, if members of the church would review the survey that was already sent, the questions will probably be the same. And if you had additional information, please send it to the leadership people and Pastor Susan, so that we could try to incorporate some of this stuff. I understand that, we all have busy lives, but if you have something, but as you make a suggestion, be prepared to step up and help us execute that suggestion, because that is the bridge that we're missing on some of the programs that we would love to have. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I see with talking about stepping up and doing it is that we've been in this COVID thing for over a year now. And people like me who have health issues, we can't really get out and be part of a large group and be in painting walls or, whatever. And I am hopeful that as we move out of this, one of these days, however we get out of it, that we can come back together. I think asking questions right now, like we don't know where we're going to be and when we're going to be there. 2 months ago, we thought we were coming out, and we're not. So it's going to take us getting out of this where people's health is not at risk, and then we can move forward. So I think we're in a pretty good position here. I think we've got a good crowd here, looking at our situation today. I'm a little surprised that only 16 recipients, because I
It was
know
23.
20?
23.
20. Okay, so I stand corrected, 23. I was looking at the response numbers. So I was thinking.
Some people didn't respond to every question.
Okay.
So
So we had 23
23
total. So we could have had better. Could have been worse. But the comments out there are good comments.
Oh, but they're
Yeah.
excellent comments. I just,
I'll
over
re-
them real quick.
Yeah.
I think we're doing wonderfully, and Susan has done a great job leading us.
Oh, thank you. I'll repeat a little of that for the folks watching, because we didn't get a microphone to you. But so Cindy was saying that in the time of COVID that we're in, it's hard to know what kind of things to plan and how to get the volunteers, because there's such different comfort levels with being involved and present for different number of exposures, right? In a given week, it's kind of like a bank account, how many times you might want to be out and about and how many people you want to be with. And the hope with the survey, I think, I'll speak to kind of why I threw in those questions about the kind of church we'd like to be or the future we'd like to have. It's because I'm so adamant we have one. And I want to know that there will be, forward thinking, and that we're going to kind of get the low-hanging fruit, like Don said, but also what can we do next? One of the things that I really feel called to do is address and come up with ideas for the acreage in the back. Like, we bought that. That is ours. What should we do with it? And it's been sitting there for a while, and we brush hog it. We know there's snakes. That's about all I know about it. So I want to know how to leverage that land. What kind of ministry will that mean for us? What is the potential there? And then I think about the things that we already offer and how to make them better. I think there's a lot that I got out of reading the ministry survey about just there's always room for improvement in areas and things to watch out for. One of the things I picked up on was hospitality and moving visitors into the full life of the church. Even in COVID, even in these days, we have visitors every week. And so I can spot them right away, and I hope that before they leave, 2 or 3 other people are saying, hey, I don't know that I know you, and come back. We've got some repeat visitors and some guests right now that I hope will find a place to be. And to Cindy's point, in the times of COVID, we're not running at full steam. We don't have all the Sunday school classes going or all the things. So it's kind of like, this has got to be the hardest time to visit churches. This has got to be a hard time to move to a new town and find a church, but that we all can do more on our hospitality. We sign in, and I get some phone numbers that way or some email addresses so we can contact, but it really is about who's going to welcome me and connect with other people whom I might want to meet and be in ministry with, beyond just worship. So I want to challenge all of us to be hospitality oriented. You've probably heard that before 100 times in church, but if you see someone you don't know, the courageous thing, I don't know you, tell me your name, and you can you say, your mask is on, I just didn't know if I knew you, and just like that. But I want to be working on some areas of hospitality and moving people deeper into the life of the church, because it consistently throughout grow the church. Amen. Grow the church.
Grow the church. Okay.
Any other questions about that? So Don has another item that's not on the agenda that we've been working on, and he's kind of our liaison, our point person for scouting ministries. And you maybe have read some things in the news, so Don's going to tell us a little bit about where.
Okay.
some things we
So
have.
Boy Scouts of America, they're currently in a bankruptcy mode and a lawsuit. And we here at the church, we charter 3 organizations. We charter Troop 17, Troop 19, which is the girl troop, and then we also have Cub Scout Pack 3050, which Ryan Kennedy is the Cub Master for. So we have a very active Scout program, but this lawsuit, bankruptcy, has brought some questions on whether or not we should continue the program. I know the Chancellor has stated that as a charter organization, as a church, we should look at terminating our relationship at the end of December 31st. But the program is so good that there are other people looking at how can we maintain this program. You know, and I know there's probably a lot of men out here in the group that were part of scouting. I know there's an Eagle Scout, and there's another young man working on his Eagle Scout here in the audience. And the program's good. My son's an Eagle Scout. And that program does so many things for the community. I know the Methodist Men is very active with the Cub Scouts, and have been for years. For at least 7, 8 years, I know the Methodist Men have been very active with the Cub Scouts. And so we have got this program, and you know, not to go back to our previous pastor, but our previous pastor looked at it as a worship program, you know, one of our outreach worship programs. And so there are ways that we are reaching out to the community, and this was one of them. And the lawsuit, you know, I talked to council on Friday. The council here, which is up in Little Rock, Quapaw Council, they're expecting to hear something in the next 2 to 3 weeks on what's coming out of that bankruptcy and that lawsuit. So that is something I think we got to remain kind of on hold and hear what's happening there. But it doesn't stop us to start thinking about how do we, you know, can we allow the facility to be used for scouting? And there's some things, I've seen the facility use agreement, and they're talking about, you know, the church. The church is no longer the charter. They are basically, we're allowing them to utilize. The church doesn't have a name associated with the troop or troops and pack. But it still gives them an opportunity to have a place to actually do the program. The scouting, you know, there's some questions that are still out there in the open that we need to research a little bit. And you know, and I'm not the smart guy when it comes to some of this stuff, but some of it has to do with, you know, what's the church's liability? You know, even if we're allowing them to use the facility, do we still have a liability because they're in our facility? And those are a couple questions. I think, you know, that's probably one big one. Insurance, does our insurance cover if something should happen? These are things that I know Susan and I have talked about, and we're researching it. But you know, scouting is changing a little bit, and we just wanted to let you guys know that scouting is still a very productive program for boys and girls, and we're looking at, you know, I won't say positive or negative, we're looking at the pros and cons of maintaining the program. You know, whether we're the charter organization or for this, you know, have a facility use agreement with the scouting organizations to allow them to use our facilities, we're not the charter organization, but we just have an agreement that they can use our facilities. And, you know, and there's a lot of open questions, and there's, you know, and these are more on the legalistic side, you know, the legal side of the house, that these answers need to happen in insurance and things like that. So, you know, but it is a program that, you know, I know since I've been a member of this church, and even prior to me being a member of this church, the scouting program has been very active with this Methodist church. So we wanted to keep you informed. And as you know, as Susan says, I'm the liaison. I'm the charter representative right now. You know, we felt that it was important that we let the members know, both here in the room and at home. You know, there are some changes happening in scouting, and we're not 100% certain which path we're following right now. But we'll keep you guys informed. And as the council told me, 2 to 3 weeks are looking at a response back, and we'll know more at that time. Subject questions. Yes, Joe? The main part is because we're a charter organization, we are part of the selection of leadership. We are part of, we actively allow them to use our facility. Where the lawsuit is going right now is on sexual abuse lawsuit in some manners. And so because we're trying to separate ourselves as a church, and Susan, you may have to help me here, but separate as a church from being held liable for what a private organization, the Boy Scouts of America, could be occurring, and we don't have control over the people. We know, I'm a scout leader. Anthony was a scout leader. Michelle's a scout leader. I'm sure there's other, possible leaders, but we don't know everything about all the leaders. And so I think there's some,
He asked
Yeah,
if there's a
yeah.
separate background
there is.
check for the leaders. So truly, the Scouts do a fantastic job on training and background checks, and the leadership that we approve has to be well vetted. The issue, as Joe was asking it, because of the insurance payout of the bankruptcy of this litigation, the attorneys recommended that chartered churches use a facility use agreement. But there are other things developing that maybe the charter will evolve that makes protects the charter organization better. The Scouts have insurance, we have insurance, but it's like saying for the church, your insurance already protects you from misconduct within your own youth group, within your own from your pastor, from anybody. Your insurance does that. We don't know if our insurance will cover things that the scouting insurance doesn't. And so there's constant negotiation going on until we get a better recommendation about whether to charter or just use a facility use agreement.
yes. Yeah, and we're,
Yeah, the Scouts are really important to this church, for sure.
yeah, so yes, Danny.
Danny has a question. Are the Girl
Boy
Scouts of America?
The Boy Scouts of America female troop, it's all, not the Girl Scouts of America. This is the Boy Scouts of America, which Troop 19, the female troop that we charter, is part of the Boy Scouts of America.
Yeah. Good question.
But, I don't, that's been going for about 2-3 years now, so very, very small program overall.
A troop would have to charter with some group. If they decided to charter with another nonprofit or create their own nonprofit to charter with, they can do that. But the opportunity is lost in terms of our relationship of influencing scouting ministries here as the charter.
Right. And that's some of that where they're talking about if we were moving toward a facility use agreement, we would disassociate our name, so First United Methodist Church of Bryant would not be associated with Troop 17 or 19 or PAC 3050. They may have a facility use agreement to use our facilities, but it's the use of the facilities only. We're not really the charter organization, but they still need somebody who's going to charter them as an organization. Can you say that again, Danny?
We can rent our facilities to the Boy Scouts for $1 a year, and they would not be an integral part of the church, but a rental of the property.
Yeah.
We could enter into a facility use agreement is what they're suggesting. And it could be, whether you say it's $1 or it could be at no cost. It's just working the details behind that. And I think that's where, it becomes more of a, the church the church's recommendation, and the church as a whole. I know the chancellor's, I've seen the letter from the chancellor that Susan has shared with us of not doing it. But then there's also a lot of activities happening where there are possibilities of other people, other organizations actually, sponsoring the troops and having the troop program maintained. Anthony, I know you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a double-edged sword in the issue of whether the church sponsors or not. Yes, we might decrease some liability, though it wouldn't get rid of them all. What it really does to a negative effect, and Susan and I have talked about this quite a bit also, is right now Don is charter org rep. If we have a Boy Scout leader who the church feels is not fulfilling the precepts of the scouting law or what we want represented of our church, Don, all he has to do is make one call as the charter org rep, and that person is no longer a scouting leader. Okay, so that is the control that we have as a charter org rep. We can say this person is not representative of our organization. If, for example, we disassociate ourselves from them as a charter org rep, and they use Friends of Scouting. There's actually an LLC right now set up for our troops that's called Friends of Scouting, and that charters these groups, then the only oversight that we would have would be our facilities use agreement and saying, we no longer going to let you use our facilities. So it's almost like unless you do this, so it's almost like an all or nothing situation at that point. The other issue, and I just want to back up to Joe's question earlier, what came out of this lawsuit, Joe, that caused the difference from the 20 years prior to now, is that our scouts have always, and our scout leaders have always paid for BSA insurance. That's part of our fees. It has always been understood that the activities of scouting, regardless of where they took place, would be covered under that insurance. However, coming out of this lawsuit, basically it has been said that the charter org reps are on their own, that our insurance is not going to cover.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm sorry we didn't have a mic on you for that. I was talking about how the insurance has changed and different ways that we get charter and the accountability we have as a charter organization. So we'll have to keep you posted on this as developments happen, but we do value our scout program tremendously here. We really do. Thank you, Dawn.
And by the way, I love scouting because both the Eagle Scouts and the one
The Owen Eagle Scouts. So just to move on, I do want to jump to number 5 before I get to the future of the UMC, because 5 is some housekeeping kinds of things. The nominations will be open in September for the leadership team. And so if you want to submit a name to me for consideration for the nominations team to nominate, I open that and give me some ideas, and so we can share them with the nominations team for Charge Conference. Charge Conference, again, this year will be district-wide. So we will submit our Charge Conference paperwork and go into one big meeting or online with the other churches in our district in November. However, you are invited to come to a conversation with our district superintendent, Reverend Dr. Ulysses Washington, is coming here to visit with our church on October 17th at 2 o'clock. So if you want to be a part of that, we'll keep putting that announcement out. He wants to know us and things that we value here in Bryant, and we can talk with him as well about things we want, questions we have. So those are some dates and some information about leadership and the church going forward. And now I'm grateful that you all are here to talk about also the denomination and things that we've talked about over the years and the pause that COVID has had on the conversation. Put in the last page in your packet is the general conference page. I needed to start with a timeline. I needed to be reminded of how the conversation has progressed over time. So I wanted to remind you that 2019, there was a special called General Conference to vote on which plan would guide the conversation into the next general conference. If you remember, at the 2019 special meeting, the body of Methodists voted to continue with traditional language, conservative position in the Book of Discipline concerning LGBTQIA information or ordaining clergy or performing same-gender weddings. And so that was a special session in 2019. And if you remember, in fall of 2019, we were going from classroom to classroom to talk about the protocols that were presented for the general conference that should have been in 2020. That would have been the regular 4-year meeting. And what we were anticipating then was a proposal for how to move forward as a denomination. When the traditional plan was carried forward in 2019, it immediately created that sense of pushback from other parts of the world and in the conference about not wanting the traditional plan and not wanting to retain that language as it is in the Book of Discipline. And so you could see I've got a link on the very back of the page. After there was some consideration about how can we do this, the conversation was so fraught with tension and ultimately, you know, the Methodist Church is structured in a way that we've got kind of like the Supreme Court, a judicial council that determines the constitutionality of any changes to the Book of Discipline. And the judicial council can kick back decisions and say, we can't do what you voted on because it violates our structure entirely. So this ad hoc group was formed in fall of 2019 and wanted to make the recommendation that you see. There's a website there at the bottom that was called it's the protocol. I've got it in my hand. The Protocol for Reconciliation and Grace Through Separation. And this is the favored plan. This is kind of the plan that has the most endorsement behind it because of the representatives of traditional, central, progressive, global, central, the conferences outside of the U.S. are called central conferences. And so those represent areas of the globe all over. And so there were different representatives from those groups to this ad hoc committee, and it was led by a professional mediator who wanted to help the denomination get to a negotiated point where we could have separation of churches from the denomination without going to court over the property, the trust clause, what happens to debt that churches carry, without getting stuck in the judicial constitutionality of things, because that could go on interminably. So this group came up with this protocol for separation, and that's what we were anticipating seeing on the floor of General Conference in 2020 that didn't happen. That was pushed back because of the pandemic to what almost would have been today, would have been the start of General Conference if it hadn't been pushed again to 2022. Now, I hear on the ground that folks anticipate it'll get pushed again to its next regularly scheduled time in 2024 because of the ongoing issues with travel, vaccination, etc. So it's almost like things are just on indefinite hold. But the protocol for reconciliation through grace, and grace through separation is still the prevailing plan. Others have sprouted up. Some of the Central Conference leaders, these are bishops from the Philippines, from Africa. These are outside the U.S., came up with the Christmas Covenant protocol that represents a position of dividing the denomination into regions and let the U.S. deal with U.S. issues and let the rest of the world, work in a different way, still under the umbrella of United Methodists. So in the meantime, other plans are from the ground up kind of being presented, but they are not as prevalent or endorsed as the protocol for grace and separation. Now, on the back of the page, you see where I've got the section that says since postponement. And while there are other groups who are trying to come up with other plans for separation, everything seems bent towards separation. I know of no real conversation with endorsement or emphasis behind it that says stay together at all costs, right? The Wesleyan Covenant Association is a conservative movement of the United Methodist Church, and it has established a plan and its own proposed book of discipline for a new denomination called the Global Methodist Church. And this would be a very traditional, the central precepts of the book of discipline as it is now. They would actually structure a little more nimbly and do bishops and district superintendents differently and not have as many agencies and committees and very streamlined kind of denomination. Progressive leaders in churches that wish to remain in the UMC aren't organizing new denominations. That means, though, that that doesn't mean that there aren't some progressive churches already trying to exit. So there are kind of three streams of exiting going on. There's progressive churches that want to be free of the denomination. There are conservative churches that are already trying to disaffiliate. And then there's a group that's trying to launch a new denomination, says if you want to leave the UMC, there's something to go to. And then there's folks who want to stay in the United Methodist Church. But I think in choosing to stay in the United Methodist Church is a decision toward eventual center to left, okay, to changing the book of discipline in a progressive church. Because I believe that the way, remember in 2019 it was voted to remain traditional, and then that prompted a swing toward we need to separate, because that's what we've been doing for almost 5 decades. And so the idea is to, you see where is to separate. Just 2 weeks ago, the North Texas Conference, which is like the Panhandle area of Texas, voted. It's a non-binding vote, but they voted to align with the Global Methodist Church. So they were sort of like a straw poll, like saying, what would our conference do? And the conference voted to align with the conservative Global Methodist Church. That's the first conference I know that has made that kind of public statement. Our conference has not done that, not made a public vote to say which way we would align. In fact, when you go to annual conference, it feels like the room is literally divided almost in half. And you can see the voting gap in our Arkansas conference is more and more like almost 50-50. With a simple majority toward the conservative church. And so there's no actual top-down, if you will, Arkansas Conference alignment declaration. Which means, and has always meant, and will continue to mean, that ultimately every local church has to decide. And even deciding not to decide is to stay in the United Methodist Church, which again, you'd be told forecasts to go progressive, okay? Here, I feel like the third Sunday conversations that I want to start in September, called the Me and Methodist, which is in part a little Methodist history, a little welcome to our church, but I think that's where we need to start having our regular conversations. And just keep you updated about these kinds of plans, decisions, whether or not there will be a general conference in 2022 or if it will go to 2024. and start to dialogue as ourselves. Fifth Sunday conversations will carry that forward as well. I hope that you get a chance to look at all these articles that are linked here at the bottom of the back page. I'm sorry, the one other thing I had to report was what our annual conference did decide this year at annual conference. Because there were churches already asking to disaffiliate without a process in place, except what we usually use to close churches that voted to close because they'd grown too small, they couldn't continue. We have a process to close a church. We didn't have as much of a process for disaffiliation. So every annual conference, ours included, that last bullet point under since postponement was that we voted on a disaffiliation plan at annual conference. I'd been asked along the way as we talked, how much does it cost to leave the denomination? What does happen to the property, etc.? This process that we approved includes stipulations that the church would have to declare in writing to the bishop that they want to disaffiliate based on action or inaction of the conference concerning those paragraphs in the Book of Discipline and the traditional plan that was adopted. So right now, the conferences and the Book of Discipline is in the traditional arena, right? So you'd have to be a progressive church to really effectively use the disaffiliation plan. Then you have to state in writing, you have to have several listening sessions and meetings and conversations. You have to hold a vote, and you have to be able to pay basically 2 years of apportionments and whatever unfunded pension liability. What was eliminated from the proposal was what the conference trustees had asked for, at least 10% of the fair market value of your property. And that was eliminated. So it's, in a sense, only 2 years of apportionments and unfunded pension. So our annual conference has a process for churches that are ready to disaffiliate. But again, it says only if you're not in favor of what the Book of Discipline says. And so most conservative churches won't be, can't use the reason of wanting to remain traditional as the reason for leaving. Any questions about that? Yeah. From what I can tell on our usual way, because the protocol, the process didn't really specify except until ultimately you have the vote, is that along the way the process would evolve as we choose it to. Open conversations like this, maybe a survey. Ultimately there would be the kind of vote, and I think the protocol for separation at the general conference level said an annual conference has to vote at it wasn't simple majority and it wasn't 2/3 majority. They settled on half of that. It was like 57% or 57.2% because they couldn't decide whether it could be simple majority or super majority. So some churches may choose to determine that level of vote threshold as well. So it would have to be these kinds of open conversations and determination within our own church of what we would do. And then to have a church conference. A church conference must be scheduled, well in advance. A church conference is for every member on the book. A charge conference is for those in nominated and approved leadership. So a church conference is everybody who's been through confirmation and currently on the membership book. But again, the threshold, I don't really know if it's a simple majority or 57.25. And that's the painful part. Oh no, all of it's painful. Anybody want to make a statement? That's just kind of all the information I have right now. I hope that the third Sundays during Sunday school, that 9:30 hour, we'll have some time to voice our concerns, our hopes for the church, and our hope for what kind of church we want to be, and where we think God is calling us to be. And we'll be in prayer. I don't know, does anybody have any other Anthony? Yeah. Right. So I'll echo what Anthony said for the viewers too. The language that Anthony caught was that a church could determine disaffiliation based on proposed inaction or action for the annual conference to take on disaffiliation. So a conservative church could ask to do that. I was echoing what I'd been told from the conference trustees about maybe it's a sense that it would be harder for conservative churches because the book of discipline, because you have to appeal to the bishop, you have to appeal to proceed on the process, and so the bishop could say, you don't have to worry about it. We are conservative. You don't have to leave. Yeah, you caught that. Thank you. And I know of a couple of churches who'd like to disaffiliate. There were 2 churches that did before we had the process approved. And then you probably need to look at one of the websites here. The first one on the bottom was the Virus Bedevils General Conference Planning. There's a reference in that article, or you might look at, it's like Bethel Church outside of Atlanta. It was a really large United Methodist church, very conservative, and this happened in this appointment year. The very, very large church, and they had been moving toward disaffiliation and to leave the United Methodist Church, and the bishop decided to reappoint the pastor. And the church said no. And that pastor let go of his credentials as United Methodist pastor and started to preach as a lay minister and just lead the church without the credentials of the Methodist Church. And then the bishop appointed a pastor, and that pastor wasn't even allowed on church grounds, was given a compensation, but then the church restructured away from a Methodist structure, and then the bishop and the conference trustees seized the assets of the church, and it's now in court. And this could very well be the case that sets the precedent for church property and how civil, the government courts process the trust issue about, so yeah.
It sounds like we just don't know yet. It's got to work itself out.
So Cindy's thought was, we just don't know yet, and it's got to work itself out. And my thought about that is, I think we all know what we hope. We each have a different opinion, right? But if we wait for General Conference to make a decision, that could be 2024, and then the process will start on how it works, and that could take years, right, for all of this to kind of work out. Or we could start seeing more and more churches, peel off and disaffiliate and organize, or go independent, or be separate. And then, kind of like the pastor at this Georgia church, will I even keep my credentials? Will I, be certified or ordained in a different way? So it comes down to the individual, right? What we're all going to do. If our church decides to go one way, we will see people go, whichever way we go. Yes, Susan. So Susan's question was, where's the hospitality in all of it? And to your point, so we had some visitors come, and they were coming and then I mentioned after annual conference this plan and to bring it up, and they said, we've already been through it, and we're leaving. And that's okay. It's not going to be easy. So there's that part of me that knows this is happening. And then there's part of me like, what are we going to do with the land? What's the future of this church? I started a stewardship team to try and talk about our annual pledge drive and legacy giving, wills, and how to ensure the financial future of the church. And in part, that's to go, how will we pay the loan? And so I know there's some practical things, and then there's some spiritual things, and there's just week-to-week hospitality. And I'll go a step further and say, the people we love, whom we know we don't agree with already, but we're here together. And so at what point, the point of determining and deciding for our own selves will come at different times for everyone. If you look to other denominations that have already gone through this process, right, the Episcopal Church, the Presbyterian Church, they're still standing, and there have been new things created, and there's always God at work. Always God is working, in spite of us or with. So my hope, really and truly, is that we do provide a place of open conversation and consideration. This is important. We are at maybe really truly now at the beginning of the process of determining what to do, but we want that kind of conversation to be holy and helpful. That's the hope, right? But to value each other through it. Really, truly, if anybody wants to make a statement. Thank you. And and you can talk to me about, the journey I've been on, or what this is like, and what I hope. And you'll hear more of that as we go through Methodist and me. But I really have been everywhere on the spectrum at some point or another of on this particular Christian path, and so I've been a little bit everywhere. But I lean left and progressive, and I have that, a child that I talk with about this all the time, and But, I also, like your families, everybody isn't on the same page in one family, and there's just, but sorry? Yeah. Miss Pat said the wound opened before COVID, and then COVID has been a Band-Aid of pause, but it's so your patience I appreciate, and your prayers certainly, because there's still a day-to-day church life here, and there's still Bible studies to do, and conversations to have, and worship to plan, and greater things of 175 plus years instead of 150. But I do have hope for the future of this church. There will be a church here, and maybe we'll determine a course that no one has thought of yet. Yes, Miss Louise. What's that? So Miss Louise said, could we vote to remain neutral? And be as we are. There's someone who loves this church and all the people in it. And this is your home church, and this is why it's so hard. And it does feel like a decision is coming upon us. And it is. And so ultimately, I think the pain is that we will all have to decide. We will have, even a non-decision is a decision. Yeah. The thing to remember is what Jesus said, the two most important commandments of Jesus. Love God, love your neighbor. If we keep those two commandments in mind, Cindy said, we will be fine. Any other questions for me? So, that kind of ends where we are today. And you can ask any other question about anything else too. It's an open Q&A. I'm really grateful for your presence today and for your care and concern for the church. And, many of you have spent many, many years here, and some of you are new. I appreciate your investment and your spiritual presence, what you add to the church. I can close us with a prayer if you'd like. Loving God, we all come into this conversation and this time and space with high hopes, and we have our own anxieties and fears. We do want to put our trust in you, Lord God, and rely upon you and your Spirit to speak to each of us and help us go in the way that we need to. We know that where things change, new things can come about, and that ministry happens in all kinds of ways, from the franchise to the local dive, from inside a church building to the street corner. And we know that ministry really truly happens just where we are enacting love and showing the love of Christ in the way that we have been taught to show it. We ask that you lead us now into the world and help us to stay ever engaged and thoughtful and hope-filled, and to not give up. We know you are counting on us to lead into a new generation, and so we ask that you will help to make us faithful to that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.